Everything you've been told about how reality works is backwards. You learned that reality exists independently, that the world is solid and fixed, that consciousness is just something happening inside your brain while the real world operates outside of you. Science just proved that's completely wrong. Your consciousness is not observing reality, it's creating reality, not metaphorically, not philosophically, but literally at the quantum level. And the implications of this are so massive that most people don't even realize what just became possible. What I'm about to show you isn't New Age spirituality dressed up in scientific language. Peer-reviewed studies, laboratory experiments, findings from quantum physicists who didn't set out to prove consciousness creates reality, but discovered it anyway because the data left them no other choice. By the time we're done here, you're going to understand exactly what the observer effect is, how recent experiments proved consciousness shapes physical reality, why this changes everything about manifestation, and what you can do right now to consciously direct the reality you're experiencing instead of unconsciously creating by default. Let me start with the experiment that broke physics and forced scientists to accept that consciousness plays a role in creating reality. Quantum mechanics includes something called the double-slit experiment, and it's been running in various forms since the early 1900s. But what happened in the more recent versions of this experiment is what shattered our understanding of how reality works. Here's the setup. Scientists shoot particles, electrons or photons, through two slits toward a screen that detects where they land. When nobody observes which slit the particle goes through, the particle behaves like a wave and creates an interference pattern on the screen, meaning it somehow went through both slits at once. But here's where it gets strange. And that's when the moment scientists set up detectors to observe which slit the particle actually goes through. The particle stops behaving like a wave and starts behaving like a solid particle, going through only one slit and creating a completely different pattern on the screen. Let me say that again because this is where everything changes. The particle's behavior, its physical reality, changes based on whether it's being observed or not. Scientists tried everything to explain this away, thinking maybe the measuring equipment interfered with the particle, so they created more sophisticated detectors that couldn't physically touch or influence the particle. Same result. Conscious observation, not the equipment, changed how the particle behaved. They tried delaying the observation until after the particle already went through the slits, thinking maybe that would eliminate the effect. Still the same result. And even retroactive observation changed the particle's behavior, as if consciousness reached backwards in time to determine what the particle did before it came under observation. This isn't a fringe theory. This isn't disputed science. This is observable, repeatable, verified quantum mechanics, and the conclusion is unavoidable. Consciousness collapses the wave function and determines physical reality. Before observation, particles exist in superposition, meaning they're in all possible states simultaneously, and the moment consciousness observes them, they collapse into one specific state, one specific reality. Which means reality at the quantum level is not fixed until consciousness observes it. And since everything in the physical world is made of quantum particles, that means consciousness is shaping reality at every level, not just in a lab but in your life, in your body, in every moment of your experience. Now here's where this gets even more profound, because recent studies have taken this further and proven that it's not just observation that matters, it's intention. Experiments conducted over the past few years have shown that when human consciousness focuses on quantum systems with specific intentions, the results change in measurable ways that cannot be explained by chance. Random number generators that should produce completely random outputs start showing patterns when groups of people focus their consciousness on them with specific intentions. Water crystals form different structures based on the emotional intention directed at them before they freeze, and these differences are visible and reproducible under microscopes. DNA samples change their configuration when human intention focuses on them, winding tighter or unwinding based on the emotional state of the person observing them. These aren't isolated experiments. These are repeatable results published in scientific journals, and they all point to the same conclusion. Consciousness doesn't just observe reality. It actively shapes reality based on the intention, emotion, and focus you bring to the act of observation. Which means every single moment of your life, Your consciousness is collapsing infinite possibilities into one specific reality based on what you're focusing on, what you believe, what you expect, and what emotional frequency you're broadcasting. You're not a passive observer watching reality unfold. You're an active creator determining which version of reality materializes in your experience. And here's the part that changes everything. Because most people are doing this unconsciously, which means they're creating reality by default, based on old programming, old fears, old patterns, without ever realizing they have the power to consciously direct what they're observing into existence. Let me show you what this means for your actual life, because this is where science becomes practical. Right now, in this moment, your life exists in superposition. All possible versions of your future exist simultaneously in the quantum field. The version where you're wealthy and the version where you're broke. The version where you're healthy and the version where you're sick. The version where you're loved and the version where you're alone. All of those realities exist as possibilities right now, and your consciousness is the thing that collapses one of those possibilities into your physical experience. But here's the problem. And that's when most people unconsciously collapse the same reality over and over because they're observing from the same consciousness, the same beliefs, the same emotional frequency, the same expectations. So they wake up every day and unconsciously collapse the version of reality that matches their current state of consciousness, which means they keep experiencing the same patterns, the same limitations, the same struggles, and they think that's just how reality is. They don't realize they're choosing it. They don't realize their consciousness is actively creating it every single moment. But when you understand that consciousness shapes reality, when you understand that observation with intention collapses the quantum field into specific outcomes, you realize you can consciously choose which reality you're collapsing into existence. You're not stuck in one fixed timeline. You're selecting a timeline every moment through the state of consciousness you're holding. And that's the key. State of consciousness. Not positive thinking, not affirmations, not forcing yourself to believe something you don't actually believe, but genuinely shifting the internal state from which you're observing reality. Because the quantum field doesn't respond to what you say, it responds to what you are. Your state of being is what determines which reality you collapse into form. When you're observing reality from a state of fear, you collapse fear-based outcomes. When you're observing reality from a state of lack, you collapse lack-based outcomes. When you're observing reality from a state of doubt, you collapse doubt-confirming outcomes. But when you observe reality from a state of abundance, when you observe from a state of trust, when you observe from a state of already having what you desire, the quantum field has no choice but to collapse that version of reality into your experience. This is why manifestation techniques that focus only on the mental level don't work for most people. They're trying to think their way into a new reality, while their emotional state, their nervous system, their entire being still broadcasts the old frequency. And consciousness at the quantum level responds to the totality of your state, not just the surface thoughts. So the question becomes, how do you shift your state of consciousness to match the reality you want to experience? First, you have to understand that your current state of consciousness formed through years of conditioning, patterns, beliefs, and emotional habits that got installed without your conscious awareness. You've been unconsciously observing reality through a specific lens, collapsing the same patterns over and over, and calling that your life. But that lens is not fixed. It's not permanent. It's just a habit. And habits can be changed. Becoming aware of what state of consciousness you're currently operating from is the first step. Most people have no idea. They just react to life from whatever emotional state gets triggered, and they wonder why their reality never changes. So pause right now and ask yourself, what is my default state? Because when I'm not consciously choosing how I feel, what emotional frequency do I automatically drop into? Is it worry? Is it stress? Is it frustration? Is it resignation? Is it comparison? Is it not enoughness? Whatever that default state is, that's the consciousness you've been using to observe reality. And that's why you keep collapsing the same patterns. You can't change what you're not aware of, so just noticing your default state is the first step. Second, you have to consciously choose a new state to observe from, and this is where most people get it wrong. They try to jump from fear to joy, from lack to abundance, from doubt to certainty. and the gap is too big. Their nervous system rejects it as false, and they snap back to the old state. But you don't have to make a massive leap. You just need to find a state that's slightly higher than where you are now. Something your system can actually accept as true. When you're in fear, you don't have to jump to complete trust. You can move to curiosity. When you're in lack, you don't have to jump to total abundance. You can move to openness. When you're in doubt, you don't have to jump to certainty. You can move to willingness. These bridge states are still shifts in consciousness, and even small shifts change what you collapse into reality. Third, you have to practice observing reality from that new state consistently until it becomes your new default. This is not a one-time thing. This is a practice. And every moment you catch yourself observing from the old state, you consciously shift to the new state. You're training your consciousness to operate from a different frequency. And the more you practice, the more automatic it becomes, and the more your reality starts reflecting that new state back to you. Here's a concrete example of what this looks like in practice. Let's say you're struggling financially and you want to shift your financial reality. Your default state when you think about money is probably stress, worry, not enough, fear about the future. That state of consciousness is what you've been using to observe your financial reality. And guess what? The quantum field keeps collapsing into form. More situations that confirm stress, worry, not enough, fear. So you decide to consciously shift your state, and you can't jump straight to I'm wealthy because your nervous system knows that's not true yet, and it will reject it. But you can shift to openness. You can shift to I'm open to money flowing to me in unexpected ways. And your system can accept that. It doesn't contradict your current reality. It just opens a door. So you start practicing observing your financial reality from a state of openness instead of stress. And when bills come, instead of immediately dropping into fear, you catch yourself and shift to openness. When you check your bank account, instead of observing it from lack, you observe it from openness. You're not pretending you have money you don't have, you're changing the state from which you're observing the money you do have. And here's what happens, because when you observe from openness, the quantum field responds. Opportunities you wouldn't have noticed before suddenly become visible. Ideas you wouldn't have considered before start flowing. Conversations happen that lead to unexpected income. Not because the universe suddenly decided to bless you, but because you shifted the consciousness you're using to collapse reality, and different consciousness collapses different reality. Over time, as you keep observing from openness, your financial reality starts shifting. Not overnight, not through magic, but through the scientific principle that consciousness shapes the physical reality it observes. And as your outer reality shifts, it becomes easier to observe from an even higher state. Maybe from trust, maybe from abundance. And the upward spiral continues. This is how you consciously use what science just proved, and you recognize that you're not a victim of reality. You're the observer creating reality, and you take responsibility for the state of consciousness you're using to do the creating. Now, let me address the question everyone asks when they first hear this. If consciousness creates reality, why can't I just think about $1 million and have it appear instantly? Because consciousness creating reality is not the same as wishful thinking. The quantum field responds to your actual state of being, not your surface desires. When you think, I want $1 million, while your entire being vibrates at the frequency of lack, the quantum field reads your state, not your words, and it collapses more lack. The $1 million exists as a possibility in the quantum field, but you can't collapse it into your reality while you're observing from a state that contradicts it. This is why people who win the lottery often lose it all within a few years, because they collapsed a reality that their consciousness wasn't ready to hold, and their default state of consciousness eventually recreated their original reality. True manifestation through conscious observation requires you to shift your state of being first, to genuinely become the person who would naturally experience that reality, and then the quantum field has no choice but to reflect that state back to you. This is not bypassing. This is not pretending. This is scientific. Change your state of consciousness. Change the reality you collapse into form. Here's another massive implication of consciousness shaping reality that most people miss. And that's when, if your consciousness is collapsing reality in every moment, that means your past is not fixed. The double-slit experiments prove that observation can affect particles retroactively, which means the act of observing can change what already happened. Your past exists in your mind as a memory, and every time you remember it, you're re-observing it, which means you're recreating it in this present moment, based on the consciousness you're observing it from. When you observe your past from a state of victimhood, you collapse a past that confirms you were a victim. When you observe your past from a state of empowerment, you collapse a past where you were learning and growing. Same events, different observation, different reality. This is why two people can experience the exact same event and have completely different memories of it, because they're observing the same past from different states of consciousness, collapsing different versions of what happened. And this means you can literally change your past by changing the state of consciousness you use to observe it. Not change what happened, but change the meaning, the impact, the emotional charge, the story you're collapsing into form around what happened. And when you change your past, you change the trajectory you're on, because your past is not behind you, it's inside you, informing every observation you make in the present. So you can go back to moments in your past that shaped your current consciousness, moments where you formed beliefs about yourself or about reality, and you can re-observe those moments from a new state of consciousness. You can observe them from compassion instead of shame, from understanding instead of confusion, from empowerment instead of victimhood. And when you do that, you're not just changing your memory, you're changing the past that's influencing your present, which changes the reality you're collapsing in this moment. This is not therapy. This is quantum mechanics applied to your personal history. Let me give you one more piece that ties all of this together, because if consciousness shapes reality, that means collective consciousness shapes collective reality. The world you're experiencing right now is not just being shaped by your individual consciousness, it's being shaped by the collective consciousness of everyone observing it. And right now, collective consciousness is shifting. More people are waking up to the fact that they're not powerless observers, that they're active creators, that consciousness matters. And as more people shift their state of consciousness from fear to trust, from separation to connection, from lack to sufficiency, the collective reality starts shifting to match. This is not wishful thinking. This is how the quantum field works. Collective observation collapses collective reality, which means the more people who understand what science just proved, the more people who consciously shift their state of observation, the faster collective reality shifts towards something that serves everyone. You're not just changing your personal reality when you shift your consciousness, you're contributing to changing the collective reality we all share. Your state of being matters, not just for you but for everyone, because we're all observing the same quantum field into existence together. So here's what you do with all of this information, and you recognize that right now, in this moment, you're observing reality into existence through your state of consciousness. You become aware of what state you're operating from by default, and you consciously choose to shift to a state that aligns with the reality you actually want to experience. You practice observing from that new state consistently, catching yourself when you slip back to the old state and choosing the new one again and again. You trust that the quantum field will respond, not instantly, not magically, but scientifically, collapsing the reality that matches your state of observation. And you remember that you're not doing this alone. You're part of a collective consciousness that's waking up to its creative power, and every shift you make contributes to the larger shift happening in the world. Science just proved what mystics have been saying for thousands of years. Consciousness is not separate from reality. Consciousness is creating reality. And you get to choose which reality you're collapsing into form through the state of being you hold in every moment. Your consciousness is shaping reality right now. The only question is whether you're doing it unconsciously by default, or whether you're ready to do it consciously by choice. When this shifted something in you, leave a comment and tell me what state of consciousness are you committing to observe reality from today? Let's create a field of people who understand what science just proved and are using it to consciously shape better realities for themselves and for everyone. Your consciousness is shaping reality. Now shape it intentionally.